Hi, I'm Tom Bungard. People often ask me, are you a fundamental analyst or are you a technical analyst? And I had a hard time finding out how to respond to that because really that changes over time. It's more dynamic. So I created a view of how this is put together, and so I wanted to give you my view of the personal. It's a personal view of the profile of tools that I use as a dynamic process. Um, these are not the tools I use like a trader, but this is the tools I used as a forecast analyst. So on the left side, we got 0% to 100%, like saying if I was a technical analyst, 100%, that would be 100% there. On the time scale here, we have today, as you can see up here. So this is today, but what I wanted to show you is let's rewind the time back, let's say 5 years, and say, what could I talk about 5 years ago about the present time, like today? So what could I tell you 5 years ago? Well, 5 years ago, I used a tool called cycle analysis. That's really a long-term view spanning 5 years or even more into the future. So if you ask me from that point of view, are you a fundamental analyst or technical analyst? Well, neither. I am neither because I'm basically a cycle analyst. And the only tool I've found that really can say anything really useful about 5 years out in the future is cycle analysis. So that's the timing. But then after a few years, you get closer, like say 3 years, 2 to 3 years out until the present time. And then I can add Elliott waves. And Elliott waves has a long-term view that's really useful, at least to give some scenarios. And then I combine basically the Elliott waves and the cycle analysis. And often they have a very good way of either enhancing each other or correcting one another. Um, so basically from that perspective here, it's like more or less like 50-50, like both of them is something I use. But then when we get further along time, let's say 2 years before the present day, I can use another tool, which is technical analysis. So here I really start to go being a technical analyst because at that point, let's say we are at a peak 2 years before today, we are at a peak and at the relative strength index tells me that prices are really high and then it breaks below the long moving average. Then I know this is going to be a long-term downtrend. And hopefully that view, that's a very, I use like more than 50% of my weighting is based on technical analysis. And hopefully that is supported by the Elliott waves and the cycle analysis. And that puts everything into a coherent picture. So basically, until now, I'm a technical analyst. But then once we get into within 1 year, then it sort of changes because then I get the macroeconomy. And the macroeconomy has a huge impact on basically everything you're looking at. And the macroeconomy is something I really look to, gauge what is happening and what effect will that have. And then once we get a little bit closer, I get into the fundamental analysis. And that, as you can see, that expands over time. Whereas these ones contract over time, the fundamental analysis expands because let's say 1 or 2 years before it's not useful. We don't know what the fundamentals are in 2 years' time from now. But once you're within 1 year, it gets useful and it gets more and more useful as you get closer to the present day. So this one expands. And then we have, at the same time, the technical analysis on the short term expands. So it's a little bit different. This is technical analysis on the short term, whereas this is technical analysis on the short term. So the difference between short moving average and long moving average and short RSI and long RSI, etc. And that's also expanding. And when I get to that point, the only thing left up here now is intermarket analysis, and I also use cycles and Elliott waves. So it's a little bit different. Cycles is short-term cycles instead of the long-term cycles. Elliott waves is more short-term waves, except than the long-term waves. And the intermarket analysis is how is the other indices doing, and so on. So if you ask me right now today, what is your weighting? Well, the weighting could be like this. It can change over time, but it could be like technical analysis, and this is like 30%, 15%, and then fundamental is 30%, and macroeconomy is 10%. And the long term and the Elliott waves and the cycles, maybe 15% at present. They were, 100% or 50% over here, but now they have diminished in value because I get more and more data to work on. So as you can see, this is hopefully what you can see from this conclusion is that this is a dynamic process. It's not like I have 50% fundamental, 50% technical. No, it changes over time. So hopefully that's what you get out of seeing this. And your set of indicators will be different. This is my personal settings of tools that I use. But I hope it can sort of inspire you to look at the way that you're trading. Thank you for watching.